for about a year and a half, and we were working together. One thing led to another. We had an office fling, and that's all it was an office fling.
Consensual relationship, you're saying?
Absolutely consensual.
How long did that last?
We had got together a couple of times. There was really nothing to it. There was no romance. We weren't girlfriend and boyfriend. We had an office fling, and that's all it was.
You're the chief of department. Some may look at that and say it may have been consensual, but you had far-reaching powers and this was a subordinate. Do you think that was appropriate?
Grace and peace, you guys. Welcome to the Standard of Truth podcast, where we discuss all things social, cultural, political, and theological from a biblical perspective. I am your host, April Chapman, and welcome to the show. Y'all, what in the heck is going on down at One Police Plaza in New York City? New York City is turning out to be just as bad as what we got going on down here in Fulton County, Georgia, with Gorilla Grip, Fonnie Willis. Speaking of which, y'all, I need to do a video and give you guys an update from my perspective on what's been going on with that mess, because it's just a lot. It's a lot. There have been so many new developments, but what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to be tackling an explosive topic that has captured national attention. And here we have the resignation of the NYPD chief of police, chief of the department, Jeffrey Maddrey. Now, allegations of sexual misconduct have not only rocked one of the largest police departments in the world, but have also raised critical questions about corruption and accountability in law enforcement. And I don't know when men are going to learn that you ain't supposed to poop where you eat. I mean, canines know this self-evident truth, but there's always that one who thinks that he can challenge the idea that fat meat is greasy, and they always end up finding out the hard way. So this isn't just about one man's actions. It's a window into systemic issues within our government institutions, particularly, I'm just not trying to be funny, Democrat-led ones, just saying. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to dive into the details of the scandal, right? We're going to examine what this means for the integrity of the police force, explore why it is so important for us to expose corruption wherever it exists. And then lastly, I want to talk about how women today are not victims and are equally complicit in most cases in situations like this. So on December 20th, 2024, Jeffrey Maddrey, who is the highest ranking officer in the NYPD, he just abruptly resigned. His resignation followed serious allegations of sexual misconduct by a lieutenant who goes by the name of Quantisha or Quatisha Epps. Have mercy. Why her mama do her like that? Y'all, we have got to stop with the ghetto names. It's not productive. But anyway, Quatisha, I think that's how you say her name. She claimed that Maddrey coerced her into sexual favors in exchange for overtime opportunities. Now, when I say that, to me, maybe it's just me, because y'all know I'm black and slow. That sounds like a mutually beneficial arrangement, right? Like she gave sexual favors and in return, she received a boatload of overtime. This is what she is saying. Now, according to Epps, Quantisha, Quatisha, whatever, Ms. Epps, according to her, was she resisted. And I don't know if she means by resisted, meaning I no longer wish to participate, but this is how it's going. She alleges that Maddrey, he retaliated by manipulating overtime records and then orchestrating her suspension without pay. Now think about that for a minute. The person responsible for maintaining order and justice within the department, he is being accused of using his position for personal and vindictive gain. Well, I believe there are always two sides to the story. So let's go ahead and take a look at what his attorneys are alleging.
Thanks for coming. Obviously, we have some comments on recent stuff that's made the news regarding Chief Maddrey. There's a lot of stuff we can't tell you because we are anticipating litigation in the civil context, but there is a lot we want to tell you to set the record straight, because there's a lot out there in the media that is just not correct or is only telling half of the story, and that's why we called this press conference. So thank you for being here so that we can set the record straight as best we can. Jeff Maddrey started off in the NYPD as a traffic agent. In his over 34 years with the NYPD, he worked himself up from traffic agent to police officer to sergeant to lieutenant, all the way up to the highest ranking uniformed member of the NYPD, chief of department. That was about 2 years ago. Of this year, has been under investigation by the Internal Affairs Bureau of the NYPD for putting in for overtime she never completed. So she's under investigation for stealing time and putting in for overtime that she never worked. With her hand in the cookie jar, and is trying to deflect her wrongdoing by making these allegations against Chief Maddrey in the hopes that she'll get away with part or all of her scheme. However, the truth is, Lieutenant Epps had a consensual adult relationship, albeit for a short time, with Jeff. And we have tons of evidence by way of text messages, photographs, videos, phone records, and X-rated and racy videos and photographs from Lieutenant Epps, who is a self-professed swinger. And we have all this evidence because she sent it to Chief Maddrey in her attempts to have him begin a relationship with her. It really worked it. In fact, last year, there were 415 members of the NYPD that made over $100,000 in overtime. A member of the NYPD puts in for overtime, they have to fill out what's called a slip. That slip has to be signed by a supervisor. That supervisor is never a chief. There are people within chiefs' offices who are tasked with making sure that slips are appropriate and have to be approved, and that's where you see the bottom where they sign it, for the cordial, congenial work environment they had. She even texted that night to the chief her gratitude. 2 days later, the Internal Affairs Bureau, we believe, suspended her for the issue with her overtime, which the decision to suspend her had nothing to do with Chief Maddrey. He didn't have a hand in our decision. And now she claims she was suspended in retaliation for a complaint. But guess what? The complaint was 2 days later. So I'm not sure what complaint she's referring to.
This isn't Maddrey's first controversy. I am told back in 2016, you had former NYPD officer Tabitha Foster. She alleged that Maddrey coerced her into an abusive sexual relationship while serving as her supervisor. Now, although a judge dismissed Foster's lawsuit in November of 2024, the details that she presented painted a very disturbing picture of power dynamics and abuse, right? So Foster claims that she worked so much overtime that since then she has suffered a stroke. She's alleging that the overtime work was so much so that it caused her to physically experience harm. Now, I'm trying to be fair here. So what I want to do, let's move it away from Tabitha Foster for a moment. when I look at situations like this, it seems as if many of these office romances, many are consensual until things go south. And then once the female either finds out that she's not the only one, or the man decides to discard them because, you knew what it was, and what it was is what it was going to be, right? When a lot of times when these men decide to discard because like I said, you were the workplace jump off, all of a sudden there's this distress and mental harm, and then the women want to sue. So I want to react to some of the things that were said in the news or the press conference. The officers alleging that this was a consensual relationship, and this woman has now filed a complaint and a lawsuit with the Office of EEOC, and she is claiming, not Tabitha Foster, the other chick, the one with the ghetto name. She is claiming that this was unwanted, right? She's claiming that it was unwanted and that she was forced to work this overtime in exchange for sexual favors. However, Officer Maddrey is saying, first of all, I'm not even in charge of overtime. Like, I don't sign off on time cards. That's not my thing. I'm not even involved. That's a completely separate department, and someone else does that. Allegedly, it has been said that this woman was stealing overtime, so much so that she took home over $400,000 worth of overtime, and she was already being investigated by Internal Affairs. And then once that investigation surfaced, she then retaliates with this and slaps him with this lawsuit, right? Then there's another alleged victim, Captain Gabrielle Walls. This woman, she amended her ongoing sexual harassment lawsuit to include Maddrey, accusing him of unwanted advances of sexual nature over the course of several years. So let me be clear, right? Like, these are allegations, but they are part of a larger pattern that raises red flags about how misconduct is handled at the highest levels of the NYPD, coupled with men failing to exercise sexual discipline at work, and women knowingly entering into these situationships. This is what we'll call them. We'll call them situationships, thinking that it's going to be more than what it is. And then when things don't go your way, or they go south, or you get caught, now you want to play the victim. So the biggest issue that I see here is that we have an accountability problem, and we have an abuse of power. And when I say we have an accountability problem, there's accountability issues on both sides. This man has been the subject of several sexual misconduct allegations dating back to 2016. It seems as if he's in this position of power, and I don't know if he just got this reputation of being the big sexy around the office. I don't know, but it seems like women just can't get enough of this dude, and it's always him involved in some sort of sexual misconduct, and overtime always seems to be the topic of discussion, and then lawsuits and complaints and just all sorts of impropriety seems to be happening, right? Then there's accountability on the women's part. Because my thing is, ain't no way I'm going to have a job and my superior is going to say, you either work this overtime and in exchange for it, you got to give me a little something, or else I'm going to demote you or fire you. Because my thing is, it ain't going to take but one time for you to threaten me like that, for me to file a complaint. Right? I'm going to get this abuse on record and file a complaint. But the situation becomes murky when you're engaging in intercourse with this individual and it's sexual, right? Y'all sending each other little nasty pics, right? Y'all doing, what adults who are dead and they sin do, right? I'm just saying, it's difficult to prove a lot of these allegations, but at the same time, I'm wondering if the department is taking these allegations serious, because there is a dynamic of an abuse of power. He is like the top cop of all cops. He is the chief. So the two components, accountability and abuse of power, these are important beyond Maddrey's individual actions because these allegations highlight a culture of impunity within government institutions and also the lack of self-control among modern men and the lack of virtue among modern women. This is just a reality. Why is it that you have men who are unable to understand? It is like the foundational cardinal rule. Don't mess with people at work. It gets messy. And then women, when are they going to learn, like, these things don't end well? And if you're going to go into it with your eyes wide open, I'm not condoning any of this. But playing the victim because you're now ashamed of your actions, that doesn't work well either. And I'm not saying that's what these women are doing. I'm just reporting the situation. Now, the NYPD, like any enforcement agency, right? They're supposed to be a pillar of integrity. Now, I get it. We're talking about these human institutions made up of sinful, wretched sinners. However, God's law is written on all of our hearts. And we all know right from wrong, right? And even if you claim to not know, you ain't got to be a Christian. Better yet, you don't even have to know the Bible. The Bible says that all sinners know, according to Romans 1, they know that God's law is written on their heart. And even if they suppress the truth in their unrighteousness, which is what the Bible says that all sinners do, you are still held accountable. When they suppress the truth in their unrighteousness, you're still without an excuse. Because even in the workplace, everybody is given an employee handbook, right? They give you the employee handbook and you know the rules concerning workplace fraternizing and inappropriate relationships. They're clearly spelled out, right? You learn about it during orientation. Everybody gets a copy of the handbook and you sign off on it, claiming that you've read it and you understand it. So there's no excuse. But even still, when those at the top, those in charge, engage in corruption and abuse, it sends a clear message down the chain of command that rules are flexible for those in power. And unless there are consequences for these actions, this type of abuse will continue to occur. Now, in Maddrey's case, it wasn't just his alleged behavior that was troubling. It was the system's apparent failure to hold him accountable earlier. This is not the first. Like, how many people have to come out and say, you did this, you did this, you did this, before eventually we're like, okay, but did you do this? Right? Foster's allegations, for example, surfaced years ago, dating all the way back to 2016. Now, a judge threw her claims out because it seemed that it didn't have any standing and she wasn't really unable to prove her case. But why was he allowed to continue rising through the ranks after woman continued to come forward? Now, yet, at the same time, women lie. They lie all the time. So perhaps because there wasn't enough compelling evidence to prove these women's claims, their allegations after further investigation were dismissed. I am open to both being true. This is where transparency and accountability come in, right? Investigations into Maddrey by the Manhattan District Attorney and the NYPD's IA, the IAB, Internal Affairs Bureau, they are absolutely necessary, but they're only as effective as the willingness of those in power to act on their findings and for equal weights and measures to be applied to the females involved. I'm just saying there's accountability that needs to go around for everybody. So in light of this corruption and freak nasty workplace entanglements coming to light, we do have Police Commissioner Jessica Tish. She responded by placing Maddrey with someone else by the name of Chief of Patrol John Shell. That's who has replaced Maddrey, and she has vowed to restore integrity, which sounds like a step in the right direction. But let's be honest. A change in leadership won't fix a culture that tolerates corruption. New York got a whole lot of issues of corruption, starting from the mayor's office on down. And then not only that, but as a female, I have to talk about the aspect of this that most women don't like to talk about. I'm going to go there. Y'all going to be all right. This going to hurt a little bit, so lean in. Get ready. The question I want to ask is, why is it that when things like this happen, the women are typically absolved of any accountability for their participation in the foolery? Right? Like, why do they get to participate in whole relationships? Or we'll call them situationships, because usually the men are like, she wasn't my chick, she wasn't my girl, I made no promises to her, there was no romance, it was what it was, right? Whole workplace romances. And then when things go south, the women, they get to play the victim, and then the man, he has to suffer the consequences. Because usually women walk off and walk away with a boatload of money. There's only been one circumstance that I'm aware of right here in Atlanta with the Natalie Hall situation, where a man walked away with the bag because she was in a position of power, and it was what it was. They was making it do what it do, and when it didn't do what she wanted it to do no more, and he was like, I'm good, she retaliated against him. And he ended up suing. An EEOC complaint was filed, and the taxpayers had to pay him, and he walked away with the bag. So here's the deal. Is this dude a creep? Maddrey, right? Is this dude a creep? Probably so, right? He probably is. I don't know. He has a power and authority, and I don't know. He's out here slanging and sharing parts of himself with darn near everybody, it seems, allegedly, based on what's being reported. But do women have a lot of power? Absolutely. Feminism has shifted the tide to this narrative that women can claim to be afraid, and they can claim to be victimized. And women in America these days, they have learned how to play the victim when it's convenient, claiming to comply with the demands of those in power out of fear. But then at the same time, they get to reap lots of benefits from these entanglements until it no longer serves them, or until the man decides to discard them. So how about this? Men need to leave these women at work alone. Leave them alone, right? Don't poop where you eat. I should not have to tell you this. Go and find your jump off somewhere else, right? Anywhere else other than where you work. And ladies, don't be a thought, right? Don't do that. Don't enter into these entanglements knowing the consequences and then trying to play the victim when it turns south. This is your superior. He is in a superior position over you, and it's fun in the beginning, but eventually he ain't gonna want to play in the sandbox no more. And when that happens, you need to accept that and go on, pick up your ball and go home. Now, the answer is not to retaliate and bring a lawsuit, because now you're like, well, he was wrong. Well, you was wrong too. Do wrongs don't make a right. You wrong, he wrong, everybody wrong. Own up to your part, the part that you played in the matter, and figure out another way to manage your misery. Don't be in a ratchetang, right? Don't be in a ratchetang who is a female imbecile who can't manage her misery. So what? She shows out and creates chaos. There's no virtue. There's no virtue on either side of this discussion. Just own up to the part that you played. Now, let's just zoom out. Let's just zoom out for a moment, right? Maddrey's resignation, it is part of a larger conversation about trust in government institutions, right? Whether it's the police, the courts, elected officials, corruption erodes public confidence. Y'all, the police are paid by taxpayers. That's your money. Taxpayer money is being squandered on unnecessary overtime for hours that a lot of these people aren't even working. And then that same taxpayer money is used to pay out these claims of sexual misconduct. That is a waste of your money. For communities that rely on the police to protect and serve, these allegations feel like a betrayal. They're like, y'all supposed to be out here working, and instead, y'all out here busting down each other on company time. Do that after work. So the question is, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? I believe It's important for us to pray for justice. Pray that these systemic changes within the NYPD and other institutions, that they actually materialize and things get better. But also demand transparency. As a taxpayer, remember, these are public servants. They are not your leaders. I do not like referring to those in authority as leaders. They are public servants. As citizens, we have a responsibility to hold our public servants accountable. The moment you begin calling them leaders is when you begin to have the wrong view of who these people are and how you are to relate to them, whether through supporting investigative journalism, I don't know, participating in local government, or advocating for whistleblower protections. We have to be proactive. Third, we need to promote and support better leadership. Right? We ain't gonna be able to find completely righteous leadership, but better leadership, it's got to be out there, y'all. Corruption thrives in darkness. And a lot of these jokers are simply not good people. And I mean good in the creaturely sense, because ain't no one good but God, but y'all know what I mean. But it would make sense to begin supporting public servants who demonstrate integrity, not just in what they say, but in what they do. Look at how they move. What kind of reputation do they have? The only way we can begin to rebuild trust in our institutions is to choose better representatives. Jeffrey Maddrey's resignation is a reminder. Yes, it's a reminder that no one is above the law, not even those entrusted to enforce it. And I know we've been hearing that phrase a lot, but the question is, do we actually believe it, or is it actively being applied? And I would say, no, I don't think that it is. While this case is still unfolding, it does shine light on the urgent need for more accountability within law enforcement and beyond. And as Christians, we're called to stand for truth and justice, even when it's uncomfortable. Corruption may be a reality in this fallen world, but it's not one that we have to accept. And then lastly, ladies, get some virtue. Let's not dance with the devil and then be surprised when he don't play fair, right? Like Satan is always going to come offering you what looks like it's glitter and it looks like it's gold, but anyway, in the end, it ends up being fool's gold. So, guys, thank you for joining me today on the Standard of Truth podcast. If you found this episode helpful or entertaining or transformative in any way, share it with a friend. And let's continue the conversation about how we can hold our institutions to higher standards of justice and righteousness. And until next time, you guys, grace and peace.